Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session of TARS Conversations. This is a series where we get people from around the TARS community onto a call, and we talk to them about what they're doing in the world of digital marketing, what they're doing in the world of chatbots, so that you guys can get a sense of what sorts of awesome things people are doing with the technology. This week, we have on the call Bildad St. Louis, all the way from Boston, so the other side of the country. Bildad, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for our viewers?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Happy Sunday.
Thanks for being on.
My name is Bildad St. Louis, and I am a digital strategist, customer experience specialist. I've been working in, originally from Boston, Cambridge, Mass. That's where I grew up. I've been working with small startups for the past about 15 years. I had the fortune of being exposed to some really progressive startups in the past few years, and it became a founder myself in 2010. Currently, I've been working primarily in digital strategy, digital experience, customer engagement. It's been my focus, and really how to build authentic relationships with your customers. And with the ability to obtain real robust analytics and get customer feedback with the emergence of different innovative technologies, it's been imperative that these conversations with your customers, the relationships that you're generating are nurtured and managed properly. So currently we are working on a healthcare technology and services startup called RecoveryIP Innovations, focused on the addiction and substance abuse, mental health industry, with the clear epidemic from the opioid crisis to the suicide rates that we're facing. Personally, I've been impacted by some close loved ones and friends who've suffered from the disorder, and in 2019, we started a telehealth company focused on creating opportunities for providers, patients, and payers and their loved ones to work on minimizing the access and the barriers to increasing the access and minimizing the barriers to care and treatment, right? Our core customer right now is B2B. We work with treatment providers, clinics, small, medium-sized clinics across the country, and we're essentially providing them a telehealth platform with the necessary communication and engagement tools to allow them to make treatment available to those who are committed to their recovery, whether it's a patient, primarily with outpatient treatment centers, and providing them the treatment centers to extend care to their patients who may not have access to transportation based on different social determinants, who may not have access to, who may have to go back to work. We find that there's many reasons why patients drop out and relapse, and the common reasons are just based on really access and social health equity. So that's what we're doing. If that helps answer your question.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a super detailed response. And that seems to be like an area which I don't want to denigrate any of our other users, but that seems to be an area which is doing some really important work compared to some of the other stuff we see being done with chatbots. So can you talk me a little bit through what that solution looks like? So you're helping these under-resourced communities. You're helping under-resourced people in the healthcare space get access to healthcare, um, or get access to recovery and addiction treatment.
Correct.
But what could you sort of like paint a picture for what that looks like, how that's put into practice?
Sure. Like over the past few years, I've been working with Fortune 100 companies in pharma, and the really what I saw consistently is that the challenge was primarily we were working with in the clinical trial space. I was managing a clinical trial in 38 countries with 20,000 patients with a $400 million budget. This was a 5-year clinical trial. And ultimately, with that clinical trial, the lack of continued engagement, the lack of information and access to the providers and the investigators for the clinical trial really caused a negative impact, i.e., where there was a dropout rate of over 90%, right? Um, and the challenge with that is that it became a major issue um, where to meet your statistical um, claim, you need those patients engaged. More importantly, what I saw was that, which is common, is the lack of a real patient-centric focus and really focusing on the patient, whether it's in a clinical trial or whether it's in treatment, or really looking at what their needs are and a whole health approach and keeping them engaged, right? So if you think about it, the goals with that being a problem, not just a financial problem, a a a health problem, and more importantly, a retention problem. The common issues we found were the same. Like patients are not being engaged properly. The ability to have authentic conversations with those patients was lacking. So what I went out to do is really find solutions or tools to really enable that conversation to happen in real time, right? So the goal was to, in 2016, when I kind of started on this journey, it's kind of when I met TARS. I was looking for a solution to allow that conversation to happen, right? So a lot of the key services, whether it's a reminders, appointment scheduling, basic information about the disease and how to get access to the necessary treatment they need. All of these things were being lacking. So we built a set of chatbots at the time that were HIPAA compliant, that really focused on providing these value-added services in a very simple and accessible way to eliminate those barriers and issues that we were facing. And we saw that the challenge that we saw was that there's a lot of regulation compliance issues that could limit the what you call traditional solutions, digital solutions, to really have the impact from, for example, a website, an email, a blog, right? A lot of these things are available, but because of compliance, they don't really solve the problem of engagement with the patient. So chatbots was something that was very new at the time. There was a lot of success in e-commerce, a lot of success in a lot of retail industry. In healthcare, it was a gray area. Um, from that experience, we created a set of microservices using these chatbots to provide these services, and we saw a lot of success. I was managing a team of digital strategists and developers and designers, UX designers, and we collaborated to kind of really build that experience using these conversational tools, and we found a lot of success. Long story short, I took a lot of that learning from there and saw the same problem in the substance abuse and addiction industries, right? It's the ability for a patient to get access to the care they need, more importantly, to engage with their provider and their care team, in an outpatient setting is very limiting, due to the different behavioral issues of that patient, stigma, so on and so forth. So what we did is focus on how do we start that conversation, and continuously build a a a a relationship with that patient to allow for the for that patient to stay in recovery, right? Give them
Right.
the support they need, in a real easy and simple way. But more importantly, build that relationship, because we realize that recovery is not 1 week. It can be 10 weeks. It can be 3 years, right?
Right.
So it's a from looking at a whole integrated approach, where it's not just the therapist, it's the peer support person, it's the family member who is hasn't been able to get access to that patient, their loved one. So kind of like a whole integrated collaborative approach, but it really starts with understanding, um, what that patient's needs are, and meeting them where they are. Meeting them where they are really is what the value of that chatbot does for us right now,
Right.
by being able to do an assessment, not providing a long 20 question survey, but using the chatbot to present that information and have that conversation and ask the questions, and build rapport with that patient, but still providing evidence-based, strategies, to get the information we need to provide the necessary treatment plan and care plans, right? So essentially, what we've done, we've seen a lot of success there, and the ability for us to keep that patient engaged and be there for them on their journey, is a combination of multiple tools, but the chatbot tool has brought significant value for us, right? From not just from a conversational standpoint, from appointment setting, from reminders, some basic things that are key to a patient, or a client getting the care they need and staying in treatment and not dropping off, and relapsing. We found that those things have been very useful, and we found that the patients are taking a proactive, um, 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 approach to managing their care through different self-care tactics, from utilizing the patient portal, and so that's essentially what we're doing right now. um, I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Oh no, it absolutely does. So if I understand correctly, there is a problem of communication between these small and medium-sized, and even larger companies, I guess, from your previous experience, healthcare providers, and their customers, and essentially you're filling that communication gap. Because what was happening before is, because there is a lack of good communication between these two parties, um, and all of the people in the extended network of the patients, of their family members, and things like that, there's a considerable drop off in, first, I guess, the clinical trials, and second, now, in terms of what you're working on right now, in terms of people going through a recovery program.
Correct. So if you think about it, it's what happens when someone checks themselves into treatment. Once they get approved and they're in treatment, they go through detox and they go
Right,
through rehab, which is inpatient, and that's for anywhere from a 60 to 90-day period, right? So
right,
the whole point of IOP, intensive outpatient programs, or outpatient programs, is to allow that patient to continually stay to who's made the choice to stay in treatment, but to have the convenience of doing it from their home. So an IOP session is 3 hours a day, 3 days a week. Um, um, think about it: 3 hours a day, 3 days a week, at a time, right? So
right,
we saw that the challenge is a patient will start that process, and they can be commuting from anywhere from 20 miles, 30 miles away, right? So that patient
right,
who is in recovery has a family, may have a job, right? So it's not always what you think. Someone who is homeless is really, these people are people that you see day to day, who have day to day obligations,
right,
and who are getting back to their normal lives, and becomes a major, as much as they would like to continue to pursue it, it becomes a barrier.
right,
um, and that causes, so that essentially breaks the communication,
right,
what makes it very difficult for the patients for treatment centers to stay in touch and continue to provide that care.
Right.
And this is all free will. They're not required to stay in treatment at that point, right?
Right.
So now you have someone who's made progress, who's been sober, who is now not getting the treatment they need, or not participating in their group therapy or their whatever treatment they've been prescribed to. And what we see, there's a 67% relapse rate due to that, right? So they're right back where they started due to the lack of support. And not always clinical support is what's needed. Non-clinical support from working with a recovery coach, right? So
Right.
how do you connect? How do you bridge that gap? So the tools that we're using provides the educational and services, the health tips, right? The
Right.
reminders, like proactive reminders, right? We're making it very easy to access that session for their IOP, right? So we're
Right.
focused on creating the same experience for that patient that would be going into a treatment center to participate in a group session,
Right.
right? But now they can do it from their home, right? And have the same level of interaction. And what happens is that typically they build relationships with their peers, right? And
Right.
their peers become their support network. So when they leave treatment, and they're now in an aftercare setting, they're disconnecting from that support group, which they've built over time, and therefore, it's you're not getting the support that they need, and they're not. So it's really a challenge. So those relationships matter. So it's a clinical approach, a non-clinical approach, a therapeutic approach. Sometimes it's just checking in and having someone to talk to. But how do you
Right.
do that, right?
Right.
So we really assessed all those business problems. And for us, as much as we that would like to solve all the problems, we're really focusing on some key challenges that we see across the board, to maintain that level of engagement needed for that patient to recover and
Right.
get the treatment they need. The other business challenge we see is that we did a study where a lot of these tools, the change, the from a therapist, to adopt to a telehealth solution, whether it's a secure messaging or a chatbot or it's a video conferencing solution. Healthcare providers don't like change, right? More
Right.
importantly, from a pure economic standpoint, um, this needs to be reimbursable. So we really built our solution to meet those needs, where we're thinking about what does that practice really need, right?
Right.
So the telehealth laws across state and federal borders are different. So it's been the wild west. So you get a lot of resistance for treatment providers and clinicians and therapists to really maximize these solutions that are actually working, because they may not be able to bill for it, right?
Right.
And it's been the wild west. So we really took an inside out approach. I have a partner, Justin, who actually owns 4 treatment centers in New Hampshire, and we really spent a lot of time to understand that those business requirements, what that customer needs are, and really looking at not just a solution, right,
Right.
for them to use to connect with customer, but really what are their business requirements? Like, what do they
Right.
need? How do we simplify that experience? How do we provide the value add, whether this is providing an additional 10% of uplift in their business? Ultimately it has to be reimbursable, right?
Right.
Otherwise they're not going to use it. And we've had a lot of success in dealing and communicating with owners. So our customer is that I interact with on a day-to-day is a treatment center owner, right? An
Right.
owner is an owner, right? So they're not always a clinical person. They're essentially a business owner, right? And the
Right.
bottom line matters. So for them to move a resource to use, whether it's secure messaging, and then you have HIPAA compliance and PHI issues. So there's a lot of risk factors here that limit, that make this space um, very weary and risky, for the treatment providers, that we really thought about in our first release in our MVP, and we've gotten some tremendous feedback on the value proposition. So essentially, the bottom line is our product is looking at the whole ecosystem, from the payer, the provider, and the patient, right?
Right.
Creating the win-win-win. So if we're
Right.
able to keep patients in treatment, leveraging these tools, i.e., the payer wins, right? Because they're paying for treatment, right? If we're able
Right.
to keep the patient in treatment, the provider wins because they're able to continue to provide the treatment as well as continue to grow their business.
Right.
Because ultimately it is a business.
Right.
From a patient perspective, which is the most important thing, right? Putting the patient first, they are now getting the treatment that they need, and being going through, personally this summer I went through a, my brother passed away, and I was grieving, and it was a really tough time for myself. I went through a depression, and as an entrepreneur, and just a person like everyone else, was, you know it was important for me to continually to engage with the society and everybody else,
Right.
just to continue to keep my life moving. So I was using a telehealth solution, and essentially proved our model, where I was getting treatment from my house, 3 days a week, and from on Mondays I had an hour session, via video conferencing, via Zoom conferencing, with my therapist. On Thursdays I participated in 3 hours group therapy, which was very very therapeutic. And on the weekend there were support groups that I participated in, all virtually from my home. And the difference of which allowed me to do what allowed me to continually do, work on my business, and I have a family, and and meet that my family needs, but also do that from the comfort of my home. And more importantly, I built a strong relationship with my care team, right?
Right.
I can recall chatting with them in real time, and they were responsive. I've never in my existence had that type of
Right.
attention for my health or for anything. It's beyond beyond mental health and suicide, and substance use disorder. It's
Right.
like that relationship was very strong, and the ability for that clinician to meet me where I was at was also a benefit for them, because they were able to work from their home and be available at different times and have that flexibility. And so
Right.
patient-centric care is what it's all about, right? Having conversations and developing relationships, right? And looking at the whole health approach, and really being able to um, under, understand the social
Right.
determinants of that patient through conversation, right? And what we found is a lot of these patients, when they leave treatment, um, they really aren't ready. They aren't ready. Aren't ready to leave treatment. They essentially are not being honest to their therapist, right? And you think about patient satisfaction. A lot of them are not satisfied, right?
Right.
A lot of them were not getting what they need, and we're kind of just lying to their therapist,
Right.
to kind of work through the motions, because those relationships weren't able to be nurtured in the right way, right? So there's
Right.
a lot of challenges here. This is a big beast that we're going after. Um, but we believe that we have something unique, and the opportunity to have save one life means that
Right.
everything we're doing was worth it.
Right.
um, from if that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's super interesting to hear that you've actually developed this product out of almost a necessity on your part. Like you had this experience with you had your own experience with healthcare providers where you implemented a telehealth solution using Zoom meetings, and you're sort of trying to bring that to the rest of the industry. It's, I think, a super interesting way of bringing products into being, because usually what happens, I feel, um, is an entrepreneur will think of a problem and then they'll go out and try to solve that problem without having experienced it. But over here, it seems to be that the solution was born out of actually dealing with the problem that you're trying to solve.
Absolutely. And the extension of that was, what we realized in that process is that also the peer support aspect of it. So enabling that non-clinical support. So like that's just your friend,
Right.
right? Someone who's just checking in with you. Well, how
Right.
do I check in with you? Am I calling you? Am I
Right.
texting you? Right? So peer support has proven to be not only cut the cost of healthcare overall, to really be effective when wrapped around traditional behavioral health,
Right.
therapies and treatment. So from there we went. I started I was working at I'm a UD University of Delaware, MBA student. I'm a member and mentor at the Horn Entrepreneurship um, program. And this summer, what we've done is we were able to, you know, through their summer founders program, my partner and I, Darian, um, you know, took the same solution and saw that there was a major challenge, specifically working with adolescents, right? So dealing
Right.
with suicide and mental health,
Right.
with college students in the academic world and in universities and schools, right? So those are suicide is it's just it's it's been a real issue and problem on campuses.
Oh,
um,
absolutely. Yeah.
and so what we realize is that the student counseling services, um, you know, didn't have the tools and resources to really connect with those students, right?
Right.
We saw that the the ability to, you know, give that student the mental health um, treatment they need or access to the clinicians and the therapists were failing, right?
Right.
So we took the same. I contacted Ish, who's Tarz's founder and
Right.
CEO, friend of mine, and I said, Ish, I have a business problem here again. And we were able to um, innovate and create a chatbot primarily focused on the assessment. So we partnered with 100 Million Lives, which is using an assessment tool that's very conversational, where a 5-year-old can engage with it without getting lost, and it's evidence based. It's been proven, and we took that model and methodology in partnership with the University of Delaware, 100 Million Lives, Delaware substance abuse and mental health agencies, and we built a chatbot specifically to focus on adolescents in school-based environments to to assess, to provide an assessment on their mental health and where they are at that point in time, right? So
Right.
it's in, and I working with your team, which did a phenomenal job in building
Thank you.
the conversational chat flows. We were able to quickly prototype a solution that is now going to be the solution that we're rolling out for a pilot with University of Delaware, which is huge, serving 25,000 students in March. And we're looking to really build that solution out using these tools, understanding that the persona and the archetype for the students, right,
Right.
are different from an adult,
Right.
right? And how they communicate via social media platforms, chats, and stigma, and there's a lot of different things in behavior that really impact that student. And more importantly, their social determinants are, they're in transition, so
Right.
they don't have access. You know, there's a lot of stigma to you know, who they are, and them raising their hand saying I need help. So providing an anonymous, friendly, conversational, safe tool where they feel comfortable to reach out when they're going through anxiety, right, which
Right.
90% of students face, and when they're going through depression, or when
Right.
they're going through those really stressors that most students face and
Right.
really don't know how to handle in their freshman, first year, second year. So we've built that solution out, and we're using a peer support model, which also allows us to use students through this interdisciplinary program where we're training students on to get their peer support certification, to provide this service, that peer support through community direct interactions, which is all billable for their student population, because peer to peer, it's all a shared experience. But what's the
Right.
best mechanism to deliver that service, right?
Right.
um, and we found a lot of success in that, and there's a huge opportunity to have an impact
Right.
in 2020. So our goal is to reach 10,000 individuals in Delaware, leveraging these tools and giving them the access, whether it's through the adult um, um, uh, um, a treatment environment, or students dealing with mental health or co-occurring disorders, or whether it's through high school students, right, in
Right.
minority communities, in the rural population in Kent County and Suffolk County, Delaware, where don't have access to treatment at all, and may
Right.
not even have an access to a proper internet connection at home, but have a phone, right?
Right.
So we're looking at all those social determinants to really reach the population in a real measurable and impactful way, focused on outcomes, right? So
Right.
outcomes to us mean how do we quantify success, right? So making sure that the patient is satisfied, and being able to provide that oversight throughout that journey to making sure we're actually getting results. So
Right.
it's a whole hybrid of different methodologies to do that. I would say that the difference in why we're using TARS. I'd like to make a great point with that. Is ultimately, I looked at many solutions to solve this problem, and I found that it's not just about that conversation. It's also about messaging, marketing, and really creating and nurturing um, therapists, customers through different educational pieces and different marketing resources, and making these services available across the board, right? Through multi-channel relationship marketing, right? So TARS has proven to me to really understand that aspect of healthcare technology in this space, right? So what I
Right.
found is, like, this company has a great chatbot that has a great database that's providing responses in real time for different disease states, right? And this one over here has a great APIs that allows you to scale across small to medium size or enterprise customers in a compliant capacity. So there's different solutions out there. They're all kind of doing one thing, but ultimately, business 101, marketing, communications, and engaging your customer and keeping them engaged over time is a key part of that. So TARS, from a marketing standpoint, we're using HubSpot growth package right now. We're using their marketing automation tools for messaging and lead generation and nurturing our not just our customers, but different stakeholders in the ecosystem. And TARS has given us the ability to kind of create that connected experience across channels and platform, and be able to pull that data and create a real um, experience, understand that experience for our customers, right?
Right.
And really meeting them where they are. So we're recruiting peer support people through social media, leveraging this chatbot that we're putting into Facebook, into one of the University of Delaware communities. We're using the chatbot to recruit MAT, which is medicated assisted treatment for Suboxone, right? To allow them to um, 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 find the treatment providers in their area who can prescribe them Suboxone and the treatment that they need, which is extremely regulated, and starting that conversation where they can find their a local treatment center, engage with that person, get their script, right, and continually allow them to not just get their script, but to participate in group therapy and have that conversation. So we're using this dynamically, and it is absolutely a campaign that we're doing here, where there's multi-channels, multiple touch points, and creating that connected experience is really the value proposition, and that we're benefiting from in using this chatbot, and more importantly, using TARS, which has been fantastic.
Glad to hear it. I'm getting a sense that we're coming to the end of our session here, but I'm getting the sense that it seems like the sorts of problems that are faced across the world of healthcare, rather, is one of communication, especially, as you said, in outpatient settings. Um, so regardless of you've mentioned a bunch of different sorts of healthcare providers, universities, Fortune 100 pharma companies, small and medium-sized recovery treatment centers. But they're all sort of united by this issue of communication. Uh, but one thing that you said that was super interesting was that the specifics of that communication change uh, based on who you're dealing with. So in the university context, you're dealing with students, a very different set of social determinants than, say, the farmer living in rural Delaware
Correct.
who needs access to the same things. So now in the context of chatbots, I'm wondering, how do you go about sort of identifying, first of all, those social determinants, and then translating that into a conversation that resonates with that group of people, or people with that group of social determinants?
So there's some. It's a great question, right? So the guiding principles for us are there are social determinants in young people specifically, for example, are very standard, right? So there we know what they are. And for example, um, money and resources, living conditions, family and community, peer and social groups, education, work and worklessness, right? And transportation. So let me start with money and resources. So for an adolescent who's dealing with a money issue, what they're thinking about money. They don't know where they're going to get money. They're just getting started with their life. They don't, and think about it. If I'm going to a university, I don't have money to do certain things. If I'm a white kid from a rich neighborhood, right?
Right.
I don't know whether I'm going to graduate and make money if I'm a minority, an African American, or an Asian person in a minority community in the same environment, same age, right?
Right.
They don't know how they're going to pay for school, so money becomes an issue, right? So
Right.
so that becomes a social determinant that causes stress, that causes issues, mental health issues, causes depression, causes anxiety, that they're universally dealing with, and it doesn't discriminate, right?
Right.
So looking for how do you solve for that, right? So giving them resources to cope with with um, financial issues, right? Giving them guidance and coaching via to help them, provide them with guidance early in their college experience on how to cope with it. They don't know how to deal with this. Think about it, right? So they're just getting exposed to it. So they're all feeling this. They're all dealing with the same challenge. But how do you proactively meet them where they are? Because you know that all of these students are dealing with the same issues, or these
Right.
adolescents. Living conditions, right? Living conditions becomes a social determinant. Living conditions means I'm coming from a wealthy neighborhood where I'm used to certain type of things, where I'm going into a dorm room in an environment in the middle of Delaware and Newark where it's not to my standard. Or I am a student who's commuting, who's coming from a low income neighborhood in
Right.
downtown Wilmington, right? And those living conditions ultimately impact their experiences in life, right? They're
Right.
their
Right. Right.
foundations in DNA. So they, like, when I was at GW, it didn't matter, right? Whether you were rich or poor, like those are the key things that impact your livelihood, your wellness,
Right.
and how you deal with certain things, and your ability to have the self-awareness on or have the resources you need to cope with those issues and to deal with those social determinants is key, which hasn't been really which has been overlooked. If you think about peer and social groups, guess what? There's social media. Everyone's trying to live up to the next guy's false expectation, right? So
Right.
there's that insecurity of, am I in the part of the right groups? Do I have the right friends? Am I going to be accepted, right? All these issues are peers and social groups issues that whether you're rich or poor, whether you're joining a fraternity or you're joining the engineering club, right? Are you going to
Right.
be accepted? And with the visibility in social media and what that's caused for millennials, and it's become a major issue, right?
Right.
So if you think about it, not if you think about it, the social determinants are what's being overlooked in overall healthcare as a whole. So there's a big movement for a whole health approach, right?
Right.
Looking at mind, body, soul, and communities. How do we impact the community, right? And provide the community the resources, looking at that it's multiple determinants that are impacting that person's
Gotcha.
well-being, not just money, not just poverty, not just access to
Sorts of problems that you are dealing with over here. You're helping people deal with, you're helping healthcare providers deal with communication uh, gaps in their treatment. So whether that's a university, whether it's a recovery and addiction treatment center, uh, whether that's a Fortune 100 pharma company, they all have issues uh, keeping their patients, keeping the people in their clinical trials engaged, and giving them the holistic healthcare environment that they need to thrive. So what you're doing is you're creating the communication layer in between those
correct.
providers and their patients so that that gap is being filled. Um, but just to close out over here, could you give us a sense of how you are measuring that engagement? Are there any particular metrics you look out for when you create a bot or when you create a more comprehensive solution? that you can go back to your customers and say, look, this is what we increased for you. This is what we did for you. Or is it the sort of thing where they can see the value? They don't know exactly how much value is being there, but they see a change in their day-to-day operations, and that's how they know they're getting some.
Well, that's a great question, right? So back to the goal here. Our goal is to our platform is called RecoveryU. Recovery is about you, right? So ultimately, the number one goal is successful recovery for that patient. That's our goal, right? Getting outcomes, right? So we're talking about outcomes. So the some of our key metrics are the attendance rate. Make sense?
Right.
So patients attending their sessions, right? Showing up for that session, logging in, right? And attending that session is a major metric, right? Think about how many times patients cancel, right?
Right.
That metric is completely tied to total number of hours billed, i.e., total number of hours billed is tied to total number of hours earned, right? From a clinical standpoint, right? So there's a clear, so our success is tied in their success, and their success is tied in our success. So, revenue is a goal for us, right? Making sure that the solution's billable, because if it's billable and the claims are processed and accepted, that means our solution is working, right? The registrations. So how many patients are signing up for their care, right? So how many patients are days sober, right? So clean days. Makes sense. So the to our healthy. Makes sense. And the participation rate, utilization rate, and engagement rate become the overlying key metrics that allow us to get the outcomes that we're looking for. So participation, engagement, and utilization, which speaks to the clinical side of this, allows us to understand that this is working. Very key metrics, right? So we built our solution where our workflow and our customer journey has key events, key actions that clearly result in outcomes. It makes sense. So if you think about the solutions that are out there, we're not thinking about features. We're talking about services that get outcomes and that are measurable and impactful. And that's really how our metrics. So utilization, engagement, and participation. If you get those three right, then you're winning. More importantly, how many patients are in recovery? How many patients we can get healthy over whatever period of time?
Right.
Make sense? That's my goal. Ultimately, personally, I'm committed to really, transforming the current state of the healthcare space in this industry, and really looking to save lives, because people are dying out there. And if we can really quantify that, we're doing that, then quite frankly, we're winning. And so our goal this year, we're setting big goals, key objectives this year. We're looking at key results, and we're looking at Recovery 2020 to be the mission. And that's why we wake up every day, right? And
awesome.
Yeah, so that's it.
It was great talking to you, Bildad. This was a super interesting conversation. This is definitely an industry which is obviously very important to society in general, but it's one that I didn't really know much about, and it was awesome learning about it from you. Thank you for talking to us today. It's been great.
Thank you. And if you want to learn more, go to RecoveryIP.com.
Awesome.
We're going to be doing some great work this year. Thank you very much.
We'll actually leave a link to your website in the video and in the show notes below.
Awesome. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.